Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
After Chris Watts was arrested for the unaliving of his wife Shanann Watts and his unborn child Nico and his two daughters Bella and Celeste Watts, he would make a revelation to the police. Now the police were kind of skeptical about this revelation because the entire time of the investigation, himself and Nicole Kessinger had not been honest at least once. But they would decide to hear him out, and surprisingly, they would find some truth in this revelation, as not only did it line up with the phone records, but it would also line up with the coroner reports that they would find later on down the road. Back in July, Shanann Watts would actually go to North Carolina with her daughters Bella and Celeste to spend time with her family. And during that time, as I said before, Chris would stay home, where he would pursue a relationship with Nicole Kessinger. Nearing the end of that trip, Chris Watts would actually tell Nicole Kessinger in a message that he was going to go down there to try to work things out with his wife, which Nicole Kessinger would tell the police that she wanted Chris to work things out with Shanann Watts. But again, you will find out that this too is false. You see, while in prison, Chris Watts would confess to the police that while down in North Carolina, he would actually purchase opiates from an unknown source. And he would actually lace this in not only Shanann Watts' food, but her drink, as a way to forcibly abort the fetus and possibly unalive her. Because if he was trying to work things out with his wife, why was he constantly calling Nicole Kessinger the entire time he was down there? And Nicole Kessinger is no better, because if she was really trying to let Chris work things out with his wife, why was she sending pictures to him of, if you know, you know? Now, during all this time, Shanann Watts was desperately trying to fix her marriage, where she was constantly messaging Chris Watts and reaching out to him the entire time. Not only asking him, but pleading with him to confide in her, to tell her what was going on, what was wrong, what was bothering him. She would even suggest going to marriage counseling and would even suggest going over and getting a book to read together at night to help their marriage. This same book would actually be found in the Watts home, in the garage, in the trash. Chris would further go and confess and tell the police that while she went on to Phoenix on her business trip, she would constantly try to call to work things out with Chris, to where he would stay on the phone with her about 5 to 10 minutes. And immediately after getting off the phone, spending about 30 to 45 minutes on the phone with Nicole Kessinger, which would line up with the phone records. On the last night of her business trip, Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts would plan a date at a restaurant. And it's around this time that they would plan certain things. It's also around this time that in the time frame, this is where Nicole Kessinger would spend 2 hours looking at wedding dresses online and also asking the question, can a man fall in love with his mistress? She would also Google search how to be or warm up to having anal schmecks. They would go to the restaurant and not return home till about 10:30 that night. And Shanann Watts knew at this point something was up when she would see the bank statement from the restaurant. But again, instead of snapping on Chris, she would just tell Chris, why can't you just tell me what's going on? Just tell me the truth. You know, be honest with me. Probably one of the more chilling things about that night is Chris Watts would actually send a picture to Shanann Watts saying that his daughters had done this on the couch, to which she would post it on social media and say, I don't know what to think about this. Honestly, and a lot of people believe this was Chris Watts kind of giving a chilling innuendo of what was to happen. And this is where Chris Watts would finally confess what was going on the night of the Schmurders. That Shanann Watts would return home around 1:30 in the morning. And after returning home, she would leave her travel bag by the front door where the police found it and would go upstairs. And Chris would say that she would initiate having schmecks, to where Chris was completely uninterested, which would start a heated argument. And in the middle of this heated argument, he would actually snap and begin asphyxiating Shanann Watts. And he would leave her body on the bed. he would look over at the door and notice that Bella, his daughter, was standing there looking at him saying, "What's wrong with mommy?" He would then tell his daughter that mommy's sick and we need to take her to a doctor, to where he would wrap her up in the fitted sheets, and it's at this point he was back up his truck into the garage. He would then take his deceased wife that was wrapped up in the sheets and put her in the back seat of the truck. He would then go and carry his daughters and carry them into the back of the truck. He would say that he would drive about an hour, and that entire hour time going to the oil tanks location, it would be completely quiet in the truck. He would also further say that he would put a plastic bag over Shanann Watts' head so it wouldn't scare his daughters. He would get to the oil tank, and it's at this point he would drive up to the oil tanks first, and he would take one daughter out, and I believe it was Bella Watts, as she was the oldest, I think. He would take her out and he would begin suffocating her. Chris Watts would later say the last words his daughter spoke to him was, "Daddy, no, stop, it hurts." After fully unaliving his first daughter, he would stuff her into the oil tank. This would coincide with the coroner report, as they would find hair and bits and pieces of skin found on the edges of the top of the oil tank. And he would do the same thing to the other remaining daughter, leaving them in a shallow oil grave. He would then go not that far from the oil tanks and dig a shallow grave for his wife, Shanann Watts, where he would just bury her face down, showing no regard for his daughters or his wife. Police actually believe this story more than the story he actually gave at the interrogation table, which I think everyone believed that story from day one, that he did not do this out of a blind rage and did it just because he wanted to get rid of his wife and his family. All because he wanted to build a different life with a different woman. Chris Watts would go on and say that Nicole Kessinger had more involvement in this whole schmurder, but Nicole Kessinger will deny it. But considering the phone records and just everything that we have found up to this point, I think it's fair to say Nicole Kessinger was not as innocent as she seems. And when Chris Watts says that she would give him an ultimatum, "It's either your family or me," I kind of believe it. Now, I'm not saying that Chris Watts is innocent by any means. He's a monster, and he did unalive his family. He did this horrible act. He deserves to be where he is. But there needs to be a second look into Nicole Kessinger. Chris Watts' cellmate would say to this day that he actually has pictures of his daughters hanging up on his wall, and will also say that to this day he is affected by reoccurring nightmares where his daughters haunt his dreams. To which I say, good for him. I hope it doesn't stop, and I hope they haunt you for the rest of your life. This will not be the only time that we ever hear of Bella and Celeste Watts haunting something, as in the actual Watts family home that is still up to this day, people can claim that if you drive by it around 1:30 in the morning, you can actually see silhouette of two little girls running across in the bedrooms. There was actually people on one occasion going into the house, and on one side of the house, you could actually see a silhouette of a little girl before the lights would flicker off. And then in a same second, the next light in the next room would go on and then quickly off. Regardless if they're still haunting that home, or if they're still haunting the dreams of their father, I truly believe that Shanann Watts, Bella and Celeste Watts, and unborn Nico Watts get the rest that they truly deserve.